meet the requirement of the law, which is to provide contraceptive care and services through private insurers, but without forcing these institutions to notify them, pay for it, or do so against their objections.
Lisa.
The details here are so interesting, Diane. This comes down to a one-page document that these organizations need to sign saying we object to having to provide contraceptive coverage. That was an exemption the Obama administration came up with after the Hobby Lobby case. And the organization, a lot of folks say, well, why don't they just sign that document and say we object to this coverage? What the organizations are saying here is very important. They're saying when we sign that document, when we say we object to carrying contraceptive coverage, that triggers automatically that coverage going into place by another health insurer. And we feel by signing that document, we are causing the very thing that we object to.
We're complicit in that process.
Exactly.
And that complicity is at the heart of their legal objection.
The mere fact that they're asking for this sort of compromise, and there actually seems to be a willingness on all sides to do it, again, I just think it's fascinating how it shows that the court now, in essence, it's almost like it's acting like a civil court. It's trying to bring everyone to some kind of a settlement,
right,
and not actually making a ruling because they're incapable of doing that.
We talk about judicial activism so much. It's judicial mediation,
it is,
I guess.
and
I'm not sure.
It's almost like, as they always claim, legislating from the bench. You're essentially enacting a policy through the judges, and you know, the Congress could step in and try to codify this compromise at some point. But again, it shows you, absent a ninth vote, this is the kind of stuff that's going to keep happening.
Now, in addition, you've also got the FDA coming out with new rules on abortion, which I found so interesting, Lisa.
Right, this is a new rule on something called the abortion pill. It used to be called RU 486. And the FDA has now said, we think it is safe to use much later in pregnancy, a few weeks later in pregnancy. It used to be limited to the first 7 weeks. Now the FDA is saying a woman can use this pill to terminate a pregnancy up to the first 10 weeks. They've also made it easier in terms of how many doctor's visits the woman must have. This is a very large extension of what is a common way to terminate a pregnancy. A fourth of abortions in this country happen through a medication like this. A lot of people don't realize. So as much as the conversation this week on abortion has focused on the campaign trail, the truth is this decision by the FDA is something that will affect both sides of that debate much more, I think, than the words of Donald Trump. This is something that will, if you're looking from the sort of abortion rights side, this will give more women easier access to abortion. If you're looking from the anti-abortion side, this is something that they think could be a major problem.
Has the number of abortions gone down in the last few years?
It has been going down, that's right.
And is that because of the pill?
No, there's a lot of academia trying to figure out why it's going down. That might be one reason. Another reason is the number of teenage pregnancies themselves has gone down. There are some people think maybe more contraceptive use is affecting this. They're not sure why, but the number has gone down.
Lisa Desjardins, she's political director at the PBS NewsHour. We'll take a short break here, and when we come back, we'll get to the campaign and other issues and your calls. Stay with us.
Support for NPR comes from NPR member stations and from Cancer Treatment Centers of America, where nutritional therapy is part of every patient's treatment plan to help boost their immune system and manage side effects during treatment. More about integrative cancer care is available at cancercenter.com. And from Carbonite, providing automatic and secure cloud backup for protecting digital photos, music, documents, and other important files online. Used by more than 1.5 million customers. Learn more at carbonite.com.
Good morning. This is the KJZZ program member drive. I'm Mark Brody in Phoenix. We're hoping that you'll take just a couple of minutes during this short member drive to make your gift in support of your public radio station, KJZZ, in support of the Diane Rehm Show, or whatever is your favorite program. 3 easy ways to make your tax-deductible gift right now: the KJZZ mobile app, kjzz.org, or by calling 888-774-9150. And during the Diane Rehm Show, up until 11 o'clock this morning, when you make a sustaining donation of $20 a month or more, you'll get a signed copy of Diane Rehm's new book, On My Own. This is only available until 11 this morning, so make your gift right now, kjzz.org, 888-774-9150. Takes just a minute or so of your time. You won't miss much, if any, of the Friday News Roundup. We know that you want to catch up on everything that's happened in the past week. Make your gift right now, kjzz.org, 888-774-9150. And as always, we thank you.
And welcome back. Our friend, the legal court expert at NPR, Nina Totenberg, called. She says, when talking about the labor case that the Supreme Court tied on 4-4, it does not go back to the lower court. It failed on a tie vote, so the precedent stands. The precedent says you can charge partial fees to pay only for negotiation. That is bread and butter issues. They are not union dues. They are fair share fees that pay for bread and butter that everyone benefits
That's
from.
a Ninth Circuit Court ruling from 1977, I believe.
Yeah, so...
And that precedent now stands, and this case was challenging that, seeking to overturn it. And the fascinating thing about it was, before Scalia's death, based on the arguments and the general orientation of the court, based on those who watched the questions and answers during the hearing, suggested it might have been a 5-4 reversal.
Exactly. So, Nina, thank you as always for your clarification. We had a flurry of gay and lesbian legislation and strong reaction this weekend. Tell us how and where it started.
Well, the 2 big ones that everyone has been focused on primarily are in Georgia and in North Carolina. The governor there in Georgia, Nathan Deal, a Republican whose term limited, vetoed a bill that basically would have allowed people, organizations or churches, to deny services that run counter to their faith, including same-sex marriage. So if you were a church, you could have said no. If you were a florist who's personally opposed to same-sex marriage, you could deny them the ability to buy flowers from your shop. Shot this down primarily under pressure from the business community. Of course, Georgia, a big corporate hub for Delta, for Home Depot, Coca-Cola, the NFL, Disney, and other Hollywood studios all said, we're opposed to this. We will pull our business from the state. The NFL had said that there was a possibility the Super Bowl might not be played in the state at some point at a later date. Disney does a lot of movie producing in the state thanks to tax credits, said they'd pull out as well. So the bill was vetoed. And then down in North Carolina, you had another bill there signed by Pat McCrory, who's the Republican governor, up for re-election this year. It basically requires transgender people to use restrooms corresponding to the gender on their birth certificate.
What does that mean? They had to take a birth certificate into the restroom?
Well, this was designed to essentially reverse civil rights legislation that had been passed in the city of Charlotte that would allow a transgender person to basically choose whichever one to go into. There was concern among some Republican legislators about this. They pushed that bill through pretty quickly, and the governor signed it with very little notice. The ACLU and other groups now very upset about this, going to try to challenge it. Again, the business community has stepped in. Bank of America, major employer in Charlotte, opposed to this. American Airlines, which employs 14,000 people in the state, big hub there at the Charlotte airport, says they're upset about it as well. He's standing by this, the governor is. Signed it, he says, quote, to stop the breach of privacy and etiquette, unquote.
It's fascinating what they did in this law in North Carolina, and they did it very quickly. They called an emergency session within 1 day. This was passed and signed by
Why an emergency session?
This became a concern primarily over bathrooms and primarily over exposure of children in schools, this kind of thing. But we've seen this concern before from the right, and we've seen it in the 1980s with the Equal Rights Amendment. That was almost passed, but it was blocked in a sense by this argument that, oh, we'll have unisex bathrooms. Now, you can argue whether or not that was true. A lot of people say that was a false flag argument. But in this case, what happened here was based on this rising tide of concern over bathroom usage. And of course, many progressives in North Carolina think this is ridiculous. And many conservatives are worried about kids in school. But I want to point out, Diana, this actually goes farther than just bathroom uses. What happened in North Carolina is they changed their entire discrimination law in order to do this. They changed it. Now it says that in North Carolina you cannot discriminate on race, and it adds the word biological in front of the word sex. So that means now it does not, it does clearly allow for discrimination based on sexual preference or sexual choice, on transgender. Now, it's saying that we can only outlaw discrimination on biological sex. It's tightening the laws on discrimination.
Right. It's a reaction to the cultural either misgivings or hesitancy that are raised by the transgender revolution. Is probably too strong a word, but transgender identity and its more acceptable conversation in the country now, and its application in law, which is new. I mean, we have to acknowledge this is a new conversation our country is having. And progressives were a part of the conversation for a long time. Most of America was not. And there is a gap between understanding. You talk to your friends about it, there is a general unaware. I'll just say my friends, they're like, what is this all about?
Yeah.
What is the difference between biology and later in life identity and how you recognize yourself? And the collision with law and culture is showing itself up in North Carolina, and this attempt to place biological definitions is a retrenchment.
But
and reaction against that.
What I need to understand is somebody going to be standing at the restroom door and asking for ID?
Well, maybe not a law enforcement official, but I wouldn't be surprised if we eventually hear of a case where somebody was sort of standing guard or looking for it in some neighborhood somewhere in this country. I mean, this is also a reaction to the Supreme Court ruling last year that started to legalize same-sex marriage.
Yes.
Activists who are opposed to this now realize that the best way to go about enacting laws or policies that at least try to protect people who are opposed to this is to go to the state legislators or go to the city councils or go to the school boards and implement these kinds of changes.
This is such an important fault line. Think about what we've been talking about this morning on the show. With the exception of the union case, we've been talking about the FDA and the abortion pill. We've been talking about these transgender regulations. And we've been talking about how America deals with contraception. And these are all issues of sexuality and reproduction. This is the fault line, not just in our politics, but in our policy.
All right, I want to ask about the showdown between the FBI and Apple. Came to an end this week. How?
Because a third party figured it out. As Apple suggested a third party might be able to figure it out. As the government hoped a third party might be able to figure it out. And this, for the moment, put in abeyance this collision course that the federal government and law enforcement writ large, state police departments, local police departments, and technology firms, not just Apple, everyone else in the technology world had a stake in this argument about what is the acceptable confluence and what are the responsibilities and what does the law require if there is a legitimate investigatory purpose of the government in either a pending law enforcement or terrorism case or post hoc terrorist investigation, meaning after the fact.
Any idea who that third party?
I personally do not. There are lots of companies and countries claiming that they were the one.
Okay.
There's a firm in Israel that is claiming that it was the one. Nobody has a vested interest in identifying who the one was, but lots of people have a vested interest in saying they were the one.
Ed O'Keefe.
I think what's interesting is there was reports this week of a case in Arkansas, I think it was a murder case, where the prosecutors asked the FBI to use this technology and unlock the suspect's phones, and they did it immediately. And that, again, speaks to the warnings that Apple had made, which is if you do it to us in this case, in this specific terrorism case regarding the San Bernardino incident, what's stopping the Justice Department or any law enforcement agency from starting to do it in any kind of case, a custody case, a kidnapping case, a murder case? And sure enough, almost immediately after they announced that this was happening earlier in the week, by midweek we learned that they were doing it somewhere down in Arkansas.
Okay, but if it is done for the good of finding justice, if I may use that phrase, what's the big objection?
Well, how much time do we have? I mean, you should devote an hour to this.
Yeah.
You get a lot of calls.
Yeah.
But you know, again, it speaks to the issue of privacy. It speaks to the issue, I think, to some extent, of copyright. You know, if you're someone who has built this iPhone and the system that goes with it, to be violating it or to be trying to intrude upon it, I mean, there's some legal arguments there. And just the idea that, you know, you have now crossed into a whole new threshold when it comes to what the government can and cannot know about you, when it can and cannot access it.
And there's a question of, do you give up your privacy if you are a criminal suspect or a terrorist yourself? You have committed a terroristic act. Have you given up there? So maybe individually you have, but this goes to Ed's broader point, which is this is not being asserted only on the basis of an individual rights to privacy. It's being asserted on a corporation's right to proprietary technological innovation.
Okay.
And that's the crossroads.
Right, this goes to government power. I think that's what the objectors are worried about. Sure, you can trust the government in this case, but America wasn't built on a population of people who trusted their ruler.
All right, and on that note, we are in the midst of a presidential campaign. They're campaigning in Wisconsin before Tuesday's primary, and it shows Senator Ted Cruz ahead in that primary by 10 points. Boy, you sure had a lot of commentary about the comments of Donald Trump this week.
Absolutely. It was a incredibly busy week to try to make sense of everything that was going on around the Trump world. I spent all week in Wisconsin, just got back yesterday. Quickly on the politics there and why Wisconsin is important and why it's a different setting for Donald Trump. First of all, let's talk about the Republican conversation, because that's what this is. It's an open primary, but it is essentially a Republican conversation in a state that has been roiled with Republican activism for the better part of 6 years. This is not a sleepy state when it comes to politics and Republicans talking and being active in politics.
Right.
We had Scott Walker elected, a recall, a re-election, everything, statewide initiatives on things around the Walker legislative approach, very intense. It has a well-developed, articulate, and powerful talk radio network in Wisconsin that is well entrenched with the activists and Republican primary voters there, and they're all against Donald Trump. And it is having a material effect on Trump's campaign. He was ahead before the campaign got really engaged in Wisconsin. He is now at least 10 points behind. I would not be surprised if he lost on Tuesday by 12 or more points. I believe his upper potential as far as delegates is 6 out of 42. They're allocated by congressional district and by a statewide winner. Ted Cruz could get the lion's share of those delegates, vastly complicating Trump's mathematical approach to winning the nomination.
But that's the horse race.
That's the horse race.
What are the issues that people in Wisconsin care about?
Well, it isn't necessarily abortion, or at least the way he was talking about it this week, and I think that's what upsets so many of them. I think just like everywhere else, it's the economy and concerns with Washington and how it's, you know, whether or not it's really doing the work of the people. I think the other element there in Wisconsin, we always forget, Paul Ryan is from there,
yes,
and Reince Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, is from Wisconsin. So you have this confluence of activity and characters in the party who are all from there, and the fact that they're against Trump, I think, could very well all come together next Tuesday and deny him a big win.
His comments on abortion sure didn't help.
That's right. That was Chris Matthews sat down Donald Trump and sparked first by a question from an audience member in a town hall format. They talked about abortion. Chris Matthews said, should a woman be punished? If abortion is made illegal, and Donald Trump said in that interview, he said he thought it should be banned. They've since walked that back. Chris Matthews, I think, by my count, asked him 8 different times to see, do you think the woman should be punished? In the end, Donald Trump said, yes, she should be punished somehow. Wouldn't say how. Now, the campaign immediately recognized that this was a misstep. Most conservatives, most in the pro-life or anti-abortion movement, believe that the woman should not be punished and that it should instead be doctors or anyone who carries out that procedure. So the campaign knew it had a problem. They sent out one statement, then sent out another. Then he reversed himself.
And there was a third
That's right.
statement.
That's right.
And you're listening to the Diane Rehm Show.
KJZZ's expanded local business coverage is made possible by Alliance Bank, headquartered in Arizona, building bridges to further Arizona business growth.
Diane Rehm here. Every day we try to bring you a wide-ranging set of topics to keep you informed about everything happening in your world. But no matter how hard we work, we could never complete the job without your support. So please consider this whenever you hear something that piques your interest while listening to the Diane Rehm Show, and help us continue our commitment to quality programming.
That quality programming comes your way every single day here on KJZZ because of your generous financial support. Good morning, I'm Mark Brody with Jude Joffe Block. This is the KJZZ Program Member Drive. We're asking you to take just a couple of minutes on this Friday morning, make your financial gift of support to keep the Diane Rehm Show, to keep Here and Now, to keep Morning Edition, All Things Considered, everything that you listen to, everything that you rely on every single day here on this station, on the air, coming your way. Whether you listen on your phone, on your computer, or on the radio the old-fashioned way. KJZZ.org. You can give directly on the KJZZ mobile app, or you can call 888-774-9150.
And when you make your gift this morning during the Diane Rehm Show until 11 a.m., there's a special gift. If you give at the $20 a month or more level, you will receive a signed copy of Diane Rehm's new book, On My Own. There are a limited number of copies, but if we hear from you first, you will get one of these books. This is a great way to memorialize your support for the Diane Rehm Show, to dig into her memoir. Great opportunity. $20 a month gets you a signed copy of On My Own when you go to kjzz.org or you call 888-774-9150.
If you haven't yet read On My Own, this is a great way to do it, to read it in a signed copy of it. It's a fascinating book looking at both Diane's personal life, her radio life. It talks a lot about her marriage and the end of her husband's life. A fascinating read. I was lucky enough to have the chance to speak with her about it, and when she was here in town several weeks ago for an event. Just a fascinating book. It can be yours, a signed copy of it. Certainly a wonderful keepsake to have for $20 a month or more. It's also a great way to remember that you have done something terrific for your public radio station. You have made an investment in your radio listening habits and in the Diane Rehm Show. KJZZ.org, 888-774-9150, or online at KJZZ.org.
And support for KJZZ comes from listeners like you. Support for NPR comes from NPR member stations and from Diane and Hal Brearley in support of NPR's work to engage its audience in the discussion of today's issues and provide in-depth journalism and thought-provoking stories. And visit St. Petersburg Clearwater, offering 35 miles of white sand, Florida Gulf beaches, and St. Pete's Dali Museum, presenting Disney and Dali, architects of the imagination, now through June 12th. At visit stpeteclearwater.com.
Hi, I'm Robert Simiar, and I'm a Leadership Society member.
My name's Aaron Benson, and I support KJZZ.
There's no commercials, and that's a big deal to me. I get annoyed because, 60% of the radio time is commercials with all the other stations. Since I am being educated and entertained at the same time for maybe hours in a day, I might as well pay for it. I don't, feel entitled to free. So this is my source of news, basically.
I think it's important to have public radio because, it keeps people informed of what's going on. And, like Rob was saying, it's a nice network because there's not a lot of that extra clutter you have on most radio stations.
I don't watch TV or anything because I can't stand commercials.
We're supporting...
That's what they need, mate. Half an hour late, 40 minutes late. I reckon I could almost park on there. Oh, here.